They say success is the best revenge, but public humiliation, that's a close second. Paxton Sterling walked into the Met Gala of the corporate world, thinking he was the king. He had the CEO title in his sights, a 24-year-old model on his arm, and the ink was barely dry on his divorce papers. He thought he had left his boring ex-wife in the dust. But when the ballroom doors opened, Paxton didn't just lose his breath, he lost everything, because the woman he discarded wasn't just a housewife. She was the daughter of the man who owned the very ground Paxton stood on. This is the story of how a cheater learned the hardest lesson of his life. Be careful who you step on while climbing the ladder. The mirror in the penthouse suite of the Plaza Hotel didn't lie, and right now it told Paxton Sterling exactly what he wanted to hear. He was a god. At 42, Paxton looked 35. His tuxedo was a bespoke Tom Ford, cut specifically to accentuate the broad shoulders he maintained with a personal trainer he paid $3,000 a month. He adjusted his cufflinks, solid platinum, a gift to himself for finalizing the divorce yesterday, and took a deep breath of the air-conditioned, expensive air. "Babe, does this slit look too aggressive?" Paxton turned. Tiffany Banks, 24 years old and undeniably stunning, stepped out of the bathroom. She was wearing a crimson dress that cost more than Paxton's first car. It was loud, it was flashy, and it screamed new money. It was exactly what Paxton wanted. "It looks perfect," Paxton said, though his eyes were already drifting back to his own reflection. "Aggressive is good. We're taking over tonight, Tiff. The board is voting on the merger next week. Tonight at the Grand Summit, I need to look like the future. And you?" He gestured at her. "You are the trophy that proves I'm winning." Tiffany giggled, a sound that was starting to grate on him just a little, though he'd never admit it. "I still can't believe she actually signed the papers. No alimony?" Paxton smirked, checking his Rolex Daytona. "Charlotte? Please. She doesn't have the fight in her. She never did. That's why I had to leave. I'm a shark, Tiffany. Charlotte was a goldfish, content to swim in a little bowl." He thought back to the mediation meeting 3 days ago. Charlotte had sat across the mahogany table, wearing that same grey wool cardigan she'd had for 5 years. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired. When his shark of a lawyer, Harrison Cole, slid the papers across, offering her a pitiful settlement, the old cabin in Vermont and her 2016 Honda, she didn't even argue. She just looked at Paxton with those calm, unreadable hazel eyes, signed the document, and walked out. "She's probably crying into a pint of ice cream right now," Tiffany said, applying a layer of lip gloss. "She's irrelevant," Paxton said, finalizing the knot on his tie. "Tonight is about the Harringtons. Rumor has it, the reclusive owner of the Harrington Group is finally stepping down, and they're looking for a new CEO for the conglomerate. I've been grooming Sebastian Wright, the VP, for months. If I impress the board tonight, that seat is mine." Paxton grabbed his phone. He had a text from Sebastian. Message. "Big night. The old man is supposedly sending a proxy to observe. Keep your nose clean. And maybe don't flaunt the girl too much. The board is traditional." Paxton scoffed and typed back. "The girl stays. They need to see vitality. See you there." "Let's go," Paxton said, grabbing his keycard. "The limo is waiting." As they descended in the elevator, Paxton felt a surge of adrenaline. He had spent 10 years climbing the corporate ladder at Apex Global. He had started in sales, stepped on necks in middle management, and finally reached the C-suite. Charlotte had been there for the early days, typing up his reports when he was too drunk to do it, ironing his shirts, hosting dinner parties for his boring bosses on a shoestring budget. but she didn't fit the image anymore. She was too quiet, too frugal. She refused to wear the flashy jewelry he bought. She preferred donating to animal shelters rather than attending galas. She was an anchor dragging him down, and he had finally cut the rope. They stepped out of the hotel and into the flashing lights of the paparazzi. It wasn't the Oscars, but in the world of high finance, the annual Harrington Summit was the Super Bowl. Mr. Sterling, over here. Paxton flashed his $1,000,000 smile, gripping Tiffany's waist possessively. He was free, he was rich, and he was about to become the most powerful man in the city. He had no idea that the goldfish he left behind was actually a great white shark waiting in deep water. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was transformed into a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the 300 guests below. This was the 1%, the elite, the people who moved markets with a whisper. Paxton Sterling thrived in this environment. He moved through the crowd like a predator in a tuxedo, shaking hands with firmness, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, and subtly positioning himself near the most important people in the room. Tiffany clung to his arm, her eyes wide. "That's the guy from the news, the tech billionaire," she whispered loudly. "Keep your voice down," Paxton hissed through a smile, waving at a board member. "Act like you belong here, Tiffany." He spotted Sebastian Wright near the open bar. Sebastian was a nervous man, balding and constantly sweating, but he held the keys to the kingdom. "Sebastian!" Paxton boomed, approaching him. Sebastian jumped, nearly spilling his scotch. "Paxton, you made it, and you brought company." He looked at Tiffany with a mix of judgment and envy. "Tiffany, this is Sebastian Wright, the man who's going to make me CEO next week," Paxton said with a wink. Sebastian loosened his collar. "Paxton, listen, the atmosphere is weird tonight. I heard whispers. The Harrington family, the actual family, is here. Not just the board." Paxton paused. The Harrington family was a myth in the industry. Silvio Harrington, the patriarch, hadn't been seen in public since the late 90s. He owned Apex Global, Harrington Heavy Industries, and half the real estate in Manhattan, but he ran it all from the shadows. "Silvio is here?" Paxton asked. His interest piqued. "No one knows, but they say his daughter is coming." Paxton laughed. "Daughter? I didn't know he had one. Probably some spoiled brat who wants to launch a fashion line. I can handle a daddy's girl, Sebastian. If she's the proxy, I'll charm her. She'll sign off on my promotion, and we'll be drinking Dom Perignon by midnight." "I don't know, Paxton. Just be careful. The divorce. It's public record now. Some of the older board members, like Archibald, they liked Charlotte. They asked where she was." Paxton felt a flash of irritation. "Charlotte is history. Tell them she's unwell. Tell them she's having a breakdown. I don't care. Just keep the focus on my Q3 numbers." He turned away from Sebastian, pulling Tiffany toward the center of the room. He needed to make a splash. He saw Archibald Thorne, the chairman of the board, standing near the orchestra. Archibald was 80, walked with a cane, and held traditional values that Paxton found archaic. "Archibald," Paxton greeted, extending a hand. Archibald looked at Paxton, then at Tiffany's plunging neckline, and finally back at Paxton. He didn't take the hand. "Paxton," Archibald said, his voice like gravel. "I expected to see Charlotte tonight. She always had such insight into the charitable arm of the company." "Charlotte and I have parted ways, Archibald," Paxton said smoothly, not missing a beat. "It was for the best. We grew apart. She just couldn't keep up with the demands of my life. You understand how it is. Heavy is the head that wears the crown." "Is that so?" Archibald raised a bushy white eyebrow. She seemed quite capable to me, a woman of substance. Substance, perhaps, but no vision, Paxton said dismissively. This is Tiffany. She's studying interior design. Tiffany beamed. I love your cane. It's so vintage. Archibald stared at her coldly. It's antique, young lady. Not vintage. He turned back to Paxton. The keynote speaker is arriving in 10 minutes. The real owner, as the invite stated. I suggest you find your seat, Paxton. It's going to be an illuminating evening. Archibald walked away. Old fossil, Paxton muttered. Once I'm CEO, he's the first one I'm forcing into retirement. He was mean, Tiffany pouted. Can we get another drink? One more, then we sit. As Paxton waited at the bar, he overheard a conversation between two women standing near a pillar. Did you hear? One whispered. Silvio Harrington is stepping down tonight. Total transfer of power. To whom? That's the secret. But apparently, the successor has been working undercover in the company for years. Like undercover boss, but real life. Paxton rolled his eyes. Corporate gossip was always so dramatic. He checked his phone. No missed calls from Charlotte. Good. He half expected her to call him, begging for more money or asking how to work the boiler in the Vermont cabin. He felt a vibration in his pocket. It was an email notification. Subject: Notice of Equity Adjustment. He frowned. He tried to open it, but the Wi-Fi in the ballroom was spotty. Weird, he mumbled. Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The chatter died down instantly. A spotlight hit the stage at the far end of the room. A hush fell over the crowd. A man in a sharp black suit walked up to the microphone. It was the head of legal for the Harrington Group. Ladies and gentlemen, the man announced, thank you for joining us at the annual summit. Tonight is a historic night. For 40 years, Silvio Harrington has guided this ship from afar. Tonight, he passes the torch. Paxton nudged Tiffany. Watch this. This is where they announce the search committee for the new CEO. That's my cue to look humble. But first, the lawyer continued, Mr. Harrington wished to clarify the ownership structure of Apex Global, specifically regarding the rumors of a merger. Paxton leaned forward. There will be no merger, the lawyer said. The room gasped. Paxton froze. No merger. That was his entire platform. Instead, the lawyer said, the Harrington Group is engaging in a complete restructuring of leadership. And to announce that, please welcome the majority shareholder and the new chairwoman of the board, Ms. Charlotte Harrington. Paxton blinked. He shook his head, sure he had heard the name wrong. Charlotte Harrington? No. My ex-wife is Charlotte Kensington. Just a coincidental name. Who is that? Tiffany whispered. The double doors at the side of the stage opened. The spotlight swung to the entrance. And there she was. But it wasn't the Charlotte Paxton knew. Gone was the grey wool cardigan. Gone was the messy bun. The woman stepping into the light was wearing a midnight blue gown that shimmered like the night sky, tailored to absolute perfection. It hugged curves Paxton had forgotten she had. Her hair was a sleek cascade of chestnut waves, and around her neck sat a diamond necklace that was likely worth more than Paxton's entire portfolio. She walked with a grace and power that sucked the air out of the room. She didn't look down. She didn't look shy. She looked like a queen entering her throne room. She walked up the stairs to the stage, the heavy silence of the room, broken only by the click of her heels. She stood behind the podium, looked out at the sea of faces, and her eyes locked instantly, with laser precision, onto table 14, right onto Paxton. She tilted her head slightly, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. Good evening, Charlotte said, her voice smooth, confident, and amplified through the speakers. I believe some introductions are in order, especially for those who thought they knew me. Paxton's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom. "Oh my God," Tiffany whispered, horrified. "Paxton, isn't that your wife?" Paxton couldn't breathe. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. "No," he croaked. That's not possible. She's broke. She's a nobody." Charlotte leaned into the microphone. "My father, Silvio Harrington, taught me that to truly know a company and the people within it, you must observe them when they think no one is watching. For the last 10 years, I have done exactly that." She paused, her gaze not wavering from Paxton's pale face. "And I have found that the rot starts at the head." The shattering of Paxton's champagne glass was the only sound in the room for 3 agonizing seconds. Then, the murmurs started. They rippled outward from table 14 like a tsunami wave. Whispers of, "Is that Sterling?" and "Did you know?" Paxton felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold and clammy. Beside him, Tiffany was frantically scrolling on her phone under the table. "Paxton," she hissed. "I just Googled her. Charlotte Harrington. Estimated net worth. Oh my God. It says here she sits on the board of the Metropolitan Museum and runs the Harrington Foundation anonymously. Why did you say she was a broke housewife?" "Shut up," Paxton snapped, his eyes glued to the stage. "There's a mistake. This is a prank, a twisted joke." On stage, Charlotte continued her speech. She didn't look angry. She looked amused, which was infinitely worse. "For years," Charlotte said, her voice echoing clearly, "I have watched how business is conducted in my father's company. I wanted to see who valued the work and who valued the title. I lived a simple life to see who would love me for me, and not for the Harrington name." She took a slow sip of water, her eyes sweeping the room. "I found that integrity is rare," she continued. "I watched executives take credit for the ideas of their subordinates. I watched ambitious men cut corners to boost quarterly figures, sacrificing long-term stability for short-term bonuses. And I watched as loyalty was traded for younger models the moment success seemed guaranteed." The crowd chuckled nervously. It was a general statement, but everyone at table 14 knew exactly who the bullet was aimed at. "I have spent the last decade quietly correcting these errors from the shadows," Charlotte said. "Those reports that saved the logistics division in 2018, I wrote them. The merger with Oakhaven that saved Apex Global from bankruptcy. I negotiated that over the phone from my kitchen table, while my husband thought I was ordering groceries." Paxton felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The Oakhaven merger. He had taken full credit for that. He had won Executive of the Year because of that deal. He remembered coming home that night, drunk on champagne, tossing his jacket at Charlotte and bragging about how he crushed the negotiation. She had just smiled and made him coffee. She knew, he realized with horror. She let me play the big man while she pulled the strings. "But the era of shadows is over," Charlotte declared, her voice hardening. "Effective immediately, I am assuming the role of CEO of Apex Global. My first order of business will be a complete audit of the executive suite. We will be trimming the fat." "Thank you." Thunderous applause broke out. It was the kind of applause born of fear and respect. Charlotte stepped down from the podium. Immediately, a phalanx of security guards and sycophants surrounded her. "I have to talk to her," Paxton said, standing up. His legs felt wobbly. "Paxton, don't," Sebastian Wright whispered, appearing at his elbow. "You're dead in the water, man. Just leave. Save what little dignity you have." Dignity? Paxton spat, adjusting his jacket. She's my wife. Or, she was. She deceived me, Sebastian. This is fraud. She hid billions of dollars from me during the divorce. A manic gleam entered Paxton's eyes. The shock was fading, replaced by the greedy desperation of a man who sees a loophole. Think about it, Paxton said, his voice rising. If she didn't disclose her assets, the divorce settlement is invalid. I'm still her husband, legally. I'm entitled to half. Half of this. He gestured wildly at the room. He pushed past Sebastian. Paxton, wait! Tiffany called out, but he ignored her. He saw his golden ticket. He saw a lawsuit that would make him richer than any CEO's salary ever could. He marched toward the VIP section, where Charlotte was accepting congratulations from the mayor. Charlotte! Paxton shouted, breaking through the line of people. The music stopped. People turned. Archibald Thorne looked at Paxton with pure disgust. Charlotte turned slowly. Up close, she was breathtaking. The power suited her. She looked at him, not with love, not even with hate, but with the mild annoyance one might feel for a fly at a picnic. Hello, Paxton, she said coolly. I see you brought your interior designer. Cut the crap, Charlotte, Paxton barked, trying to regain his alpha dominance. What is this game? You're Charlotte Harrington? Since when? Since birth, she replied comfortably. I used my mother's maiden name, Kensington, to live a normal life. I wanted to see if a man could build a life with me, not my trust fund. You failed that test, Paxton, spectacularly. You lied to me, Paxton accused, pointing a finger at her face. A security guard stepped forward, but Charlotte raised a hand to stop him. You committed fraud. We signed divorce papers yesterday based on a false financial statement. You hid assets. That voids the agreement. I'm going to sue you for everything you have. The crowd gasped. It was ugly. It was desperate. Charlotte laughed. It was a dry, dark sound. Oh, Paxton, she said, shaking her head. You always were terrible at reading the fine print. That's why I had to write all your contracts for you. What are you talking about? The prenup you made me sign 10 years ago, Charlotte said. Do you remember it? Paxton frowned. He did. When they got married, Paxton had just gotten his first promotion. He was making 6 figures and thought he was rich. He had forced Charlotte to sign a prenup to protect his future assets, because he was terrified she was a gold digger. I remember, Paxton sneered. I wanted to protect my 401k. Yes, Charlotte smiled. And because your lawyer was a cheap strip mall amateur, the clause was reciprocal and absolute. It stated that what is yours, and what is mine, regardless of future acquisition or inheritance. You were so worried about me taking your $50,000 that you signed away your right to my $50 billion. Paxton froze. The memory of the document came rushing back. He had been so smug when he made her sign it. Furthermore, Charlotte continued, taking a step closer, the settlement we signed yesterday, it included a full and final release of all claims, known and unknown. My lawyers, the best in the world, by the way, made sure it was ironclad. You got the Honda, Paxton. Be happy with it. This isn't over, Paxton snarled, his face turning red. I helped build this company. I am the face of Apex Global. You are a mascot, Charlotte corrected him, and you're fired. The words hung in the air. What? You're fired, Paxton. For cause. Embezzlement of company time, misuse of corporate funds. I have the receipts for the trips you took with Miss Banks on the company jet. And gross incompetence. Security will escort you out. 2 massive guards in black suits materialized on either side of Paxton. You can't do this! Paxton screamed as they grabbed his arms. I made you. I let you live in my house. I bought you clothes. And I bought the building we're standing in, Charlotte said calmly. Goodbye, Paxton. As he was dragged away, kicking and shouting, he looked back to see Tiffany. He expected her to follow him, to comfort him. Instead, Tiffany was standing near the bar, holding her phone up, recording the entire thing. She caught his eye, gave a small, apologetic shrug, and turned her back to him. Paxton Sterling was thrown out the side door of the Pierre Hotel, landing on the cold concrete of the alleyway. But the night wasn't over. And neither was the punishment. The alley behind the Pierre smelled of garbage and exhaust fumes, a stark contrast to the Chanel No. 5 and roasted duck scent of the ballroom. Paxton dusted off his Tom Ford tuxedo, which now had a smear of grime on the knee. He was shaking. Rage, pure and unadulterated, coursed through him. She can't do this, he muttered, pacing back and forth. She can't just fire me. I have a contract. I have tenure. He reached for his phone to call Harrison Cole, his lawyer. The number you have reached is not in service. Paxton frowned. He dialed again. Same message. He checked his email. His work account, locked. His access to the company servers, denied. In the span of 20 minutes, he had been digitally erased. Think, Paxton, think, he hissed, pressing his knuckles to his temples. He needed leverage. Charlotte was confident, yes, but she was still the woman who cried during romantic comedies. She had a soft spot. He just had to find it. He decided to go back to the front entrance. He would wait. He would cause a scene if he had to. The paparazzi were there. If he couldn't have the money, he would destroy her reputation. Billionaire heiress scams husband. That was a headline he could sell. He walked around the block to the main entrance on Fifth Avenue. The photographers were still there, bored now that the guests were inside. When Paxton appeared, disheveled and wild-eyed, a few flashes popped. "Mr. Sterling, why did you leave so early?" one reporter yelled. "Ask my wife," Paxton shouted back, playing the victim. "Ask Charlotte Harrington how she defrauded her husband for 10 years. It's all a lie. She's mentally unstable." The reporters perked up. This was gold. Suddenly, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the curb, blocking the reporter's view of Paxton. The back door opened. A man stepped out. He was old, perhaps in his late 70s, but he stood as straight as a steel beam. He wore a tuxedo that looked like it was cut from midnight itself. He leaned on a cane topped with a silver lion's head. The reporters went silent. They lowered their cameras out of instinct. It was Silvio Harrington, the myth, the man who built New York's skyline. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked directly at Paxton. "Get in," Silvio said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of an anvil. Paxton hesitated. This was the man he had wanted to impress all night. Now, he was terrified of him. But he also saw an opportunity. If he could talk to the father, maybe he could reason with him. Man to man. Paxton opened the door and slid into the leather interior. Silvio followed, the door closing with a heavy thud that shut out the noise of the city. The car didn't move. The driver sat like a statue behind the partition. Silvio sat silently for a moment, removing his leather gloves, finger by finger. "Mr. Harrington," Paxton began, his voice trembling slightly. "It's an honor. I don't know what Charlotte told you, but there are two sides to every story. I've been a loyal employee of Apex for 10 years. My numbers. I know your numbers," Silvio interrupted. He didn't look at Paxton. He was looking out the window at the city lights. "I know that in 2021, you fudged the Q4 projections to trigger your bonus. I know that you fired your assistant, Mrs. Higgins, because she was pregnant, and you didn't want to deal with maternity leave. I know that you have been siphoning petty cash for your mistress's apartment rent under the guise of client entertainment. Paxton's mouth went dry. That's interpretation. I know, Silvio turned his head, his eyes ice blue and piercing, that you treated my daughter like a servant. Paxton swallowed hard. I didn't know she was your daughter, sir. If you had known, you would have treated her like a bank account, Silvio said. That is why she hid it. Charlotte has a big heart. Too big sometimes. She wanted to believe you were a decent man struggling to make it. She wanted to help you build yourself up. Silvio leaned forward, the smell of expensive tobacco and old spice filling the air. Do you know why I let her do it? Why I let my only child live in a cramped apartment in Queens with a narcissist like you for 10 years? Paxton shook his head. Because she needed to learn, Silvio said softly. She needed to learn that some people cannot be saved. Some people are parasites. And the only way to deal with a parasite is to starve it. I am not a parasite, Paxton argued, though his voice lacked conviction. I am a businessman. You are a liability, Silvio corrected. And I am here to close the account. Silvio reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. He tossed it onto Paxton's lap. What is this? A one-way ticket to London, Silvio said, and a job offer. Paxton blinked. A job offer? Was this a test? Was he being transferred? Hope flared in his chest. Maybe they respected his skills after all. London? Paxton asked. The European division? I could run that. I've always said our UK marketing needs an overhaul. Silvio let out a short, sharp laugh. It's not for the European division, you fool. It's for a position at a warehouse in the outskirts of Leeds. You'll be managing inventory. Minimum wage. No benefits. Paxton stared at him, insulted. You're joking. I'm a CEO-level executive. I'm not working in a warehouse. It's the only job you'll ever get, Silvio said calmly. Because as of this morning, I have blacklisted you. I have called every headhunter, every board member, and every bank in this city. If you try to get a job in finance, you will be laughed out of the room. If you try to get a loan, you will be denied. Your credit cards have already been cancelled. Paxton checked his phone. A notification from American Express. Card suspended. You can't do this. This is illegal. I have more lawyers than you have brain cells, son, Silvio said, tapping his cane on the floor. You have two choices. You take the ticket, you go to Leeds, and you live a humble, quiet life where you can't hurt anyone. Or you stay in New York. I'm staying, Paxton defied him. I'll fight you. The press, if you stay, Silvio cut in, his voice dropping to a whisper that was terrifyingly dangerous. I will release the audit findings to the district attorney. The embezzlement, the tax fraud you committed on your joint returns, which Charlotte innocently signed because she trusted you. She has immunity because she cooperated. You do not. Silvio smiled, a predator showing his teeth. You'll be trading your tuxedo for an orange jumpsuit, Paxton. And I hear Rikers Island is particularly unpleasant this time of year. Paxton looked at the envelope, then at Silvio. The walls were closing in. He realized for the first time the true scale of the power he was up against. He had been playing checkers. They were playing 4D chess. Why? Paxton whispered. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just divorce me and move on? Because you broke her heart, Silvio said, his eyes softening just a fraction as he thought of his daughter. And nobody hurts my little girl and walks away with a golden parachute. Silvio tapped the glass partition. The driver unlocked the doors. Get out, Silvio commanded. Paxton fumbled for the door handle. He felt small, insignificant. "One more thing," Silvio said, as Paxton stepped out onto the curb. Paxton turned back. "The girl. Tiffany. What about her?" "She's not coming with you. She just posted a video of your eviction from the party. It has 3 million views already. She's currently negotiating an interview with TMZ." Silvio chuckled. "Karma is efficient, isn't it?" The Rolls-Royce pulled away, merging into the traffic, leaving Paxton Sterling standing alone on Fifth Avenue. He held the envelope in his hand. He looked up at the Pierre Hotel. He could see the lights of the ballroom on the second floor. He could almost hear the music. His life, the life he thought he deserved, was going on without him. He looked at the ticket inside the envelope. Economy class. Departure. 6 a.m. tomorrow. Rain started to fall, cold and grey. Paxton began to walk, not toward the hotel but toward the subway. He didn't have money for a cab. The flight to London Heathrow was not the luxury experience Paxton Sterling was accustomed to. He was seated in 42E, a middle seat in the back of economy, wedged between a crying toddler and a backpacker who hadn't showered in days. Every time Paxton tried to close his eyes, the child screamed or the beverage cart slammed into his knee. There was no champagne. There was only lukewarm orange juice and a profound, sinking realization that his life was over. When he landed, a man named Biggs was waiting for him. Biggs wasn't a chauffeur. He was a thick-necked man in a stained grey windbreaker who drove a battered Ford Transit van. "You the Yank?" Biggs grunted, spitting a cigarette onto the pavement. "I am Paxton Sterling," Paxton said, trying to summon a shred of dignity despite his wrinkled tuxedo shirt. "I believe I am expected at the regional office." "Regional office?" Biggs laughed, a sound like a garbage disposal choking on a spoon. "You're heading to the depot, mate. Leeds. 4-hour drive. Get in the back." The drive was a blur of grey skies and rain-slicked motorways. When they finally arrived at the destination, Paxton's heart sank lower than he thought possible. It wasn't an office park. It was a sprawling, corrugated metal warehouse in an industrial estate that looked like it had been forgotten by time. "Here we are," Biggs said, pulling up to a rusted gate. "Accommodation is round the back. Shift starts at 06 hours sharp. Don't be late. The foreman, Mr. Henderson, eats posh boys like you for breakfast." Paxton was shown to his accommodation. It was a converted shipping container with a single bed, a hot plate, and a window that looked out onto a pile of discarded pallets. It was freezing. "This is inhumane," Paxton whispered to the empty room. He sat on the thin mattress, burying his face in his hands. He reached for his phone, desperate for a connection to his old life. He opened Instagram. The first thing on his feed was a video from Tiffany. It was a clip from a morning talk show. Tiffany was sitting on a beige couch, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, looking vulnerable and brave. The caption read, "My truth, surviving a monster." Paxton clicked play, his hand trembling. "I just didn't know," Tiffany sobbed on the screen. "He was so controlling. He made me wear those dresses. He made me cut off my friends. I was just a victim in his game of chess with his ex-wife. I'm just glad Charlotte Harrington is such a gracious woman. She reached out to me, you know? She told me I was free now." The host nodded sympathetically. "You're a survivor, Tiffany. And I hear you have a book deal?" "Yes," Tiffany smiled through her tears. "It's called Glass Ceilings and Glass Hearts. It drops next month." Paxton threw his phone across the room. It hit the metal wall with a clang and cracked. She was lying. She loved the dresses. She loved the money. But she had spun the narrative faster than he could. She was the victim. He was the villain. And Charlotte? Charlotte was the saint who saved her. The next morning, reality hit with the force of a sledgehammer. "Sterling, move it!" Mr. Henderson was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He handed Paxton a high-visibility vest and a pair of steel-toed boots that were 2 sizes too big. "Your job is returns," Henderson barked. "Inspect the damaged goods. Log them. Bin them. Quota is 200 items a day. You miss quota, you don't get your meal voucher." "I have an MBA," Paxton said through gritted teeth. "I specialize in macroeconomic strategy." "Good for you," Henderson said, unimpressed. "Can you lift a box of toaster ovens?" "I suppose." "Then get to work, MBA." For the next month, Paxton Sterling, the man who used to spend $500 on lunch, learned the true value of $1. His hands, once manicured and soft, became blistered and raw. His back ached constantly. The warehouse was cold, smelling of dust and diesel. He tried to quit 3 times. Each time he remembered Silvio's threat. Rikers Island. The embezzlement evidence was hanging over his head like a guillotine blade. Silvio had eyes everywhere. One wrong move, one attempt to flee, and the police would be waiting. One rainy Tuesday, during his 15-minute lunch break, Paxton sat on a crate, eating a cold sandwich. He saw a discarded newspaper on the table next to him. The Financial Times. He picked it up, hungry for news of his old world. His breath hitched. On the front page was a picture of Charlotte. She was wearing a white power suit, cutting a ribbon at a new renewable energy facility in Norway. She looked radiant, strong, younger somehow. Headline: Harrington Group stocks soar under new leadership. Article: Since taking the reins from her father, Charlotte Harrington has revitalized the stagnant conglomerate. By cutting dead weight in the executive suite and focusing on ethical sustainability, profits are up 40%. The market has fallen in love with the silent heiress. Paxton crunched the paper into a ball. "Dead weight," he muttered. "That's me. I'm the dead weight." He looked around the bleak break room. A leaky pipe dripped water into a bucket in the corner. Drip, drip, drip. This was his life now. He wasn't a shark anymore. He was the krill. "Sterling!" Henderson shouted from the floor. "Truck coming in. Stop reading and start lifting." Paxton stood up slowly. His knees popped. He walked back to the line, head down, defeated. The man who wanted to be king was now just another cog in the machine he used to think he owned. 3,000 miles away, in the glass-walled boardroom of Apex Global Tower in Manhattan, Charlotte Harrington took a sip of herbal tea. The room was quiet. 12 men and women in expensive suits sat around the table, looking at her with a mixture of awe and terror. These were the survivors of the Great Purge, as the office had started calling it. "Let's look at the marketing budget for the Southwest region," Charlotte said, her voice calm but commanding. She tapped the tablet in front of her. "Can anyone explain why we are spending $50,000 a month on a consulting firm based in the Cayman Islands?" A vice president named Greg cleared his throat nervously. "Well, Ms. Harrington, that was a legacy contract, established by the previous VP. By Paxton," Charlotte said. She didn't say his name with anger anymore, just a factual descriptor, like rain or traffic. "Yes. Paxton set that up." "Cancel it," Charlotte said, "and audit every invoice that firm ever sent us. If there's fraud, I want the money back." "Understood. Next item." The meeting flowed efficiently. Under Paxton, meetings had been 2-hour ego-stroking sessions where he talked about his vision, and everyone nodded. Under Charlotte, meetings were 30 minutes of surgical precision. She knew the numbers better than the CFO. She knew the product lines better than the developers. After the meeting, Charlotte retreated to her office, the corner office Paxton had coveted for years. She had redecorated. Gone were the dark leathers and intimidating mahogany desks. The space was now light, airy, filled with plants and modern art. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. It was raining, a grey drizzle that washed over New York. She felt a strange sense of peace. For 10 years she had lived a double life. She had played the role of the supportive, simple wife, hiding her brilliance to protect a fragile man's ego. She had ironed his shirts while mentally restructuring his department. She had cooked his dinner while he was out, working late with Tiffany, knowing exactly where he was, but waiting for him to hang himself with his own rope. It had been exhausting, but it was necessary. Her father, Silvio, had taught her. Never go to war until you have enough ammunition to wipe out the enemy in a single volley. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," she said. It was her assistant, a bright young woman named Maya. Paxton had fired Maya's predecessor for being pregnant. Charlotte had not only rehired the woman, but installed a fully staffed daycare center on the 4th floor. Morale had never been higher. "Miss Harrington," Maya said, "there's a visitor for you in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says he's an old friend." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "Who is it?" "Sebastian Wright." Charlotte let out a short, dry laugh. Sebastian, Paxton's old lackey, the man who had helped Paxton hide the affair, who had laughed at Paxton's jokes about his boring wife. "Send him up," Charlotte said. "I have 5 minutes." When Sebastian walked in, he looked like a man walking to the gallows. He was sweating. He held a bouquet of flowers that looked like they had been bought at a bodega 5 minutes ago. "Charlotte," he exclaimed, putting on a fake, jovial smile. "Or should I say, Ms. Harrington? Wow. This office, it looks fantastic, really captures your energy." "Sit down, Sebastian," Charlotte said, not moving from behind her desk. She didn't offer him a drink. Sebastian sat on the edge of the chair. He placed the flowers on the desk. Charlotte looked at them, then back at him. I just wanted to come by and congratulate you personally," Sebastian stammered. "I know things were awkward at the gala, but I wanted you to know that I always had enormous respect for you, even when Paxton was, well, you know how he is." "How is he?" Charlotte asked. Sebastian blinked. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him. Nobody has. He's persona non grata, right? I cut him off immediately. Loyalty to the company first. That's my motto." Charlotte leaned forward, clasping her hands. "Sebastian, you were Paxton's VP for 4 years. You signed off on his expense reports. You covered for him when he missed meetings to be with his mistress. You were in the room when he mocked me." "I was just following orders," Sebastian pleaded, his smile vanishing. "I have a mortgage, Charlotte. I was afraid of him." "And now you're afraid of me," she said simply. I want to help you. I know where the bodies are buried. I can be an asset." Charlotte stood up. She walked over to the flowers, picked them up, and dropped them into the trash can next to her desk. "I don't need a weather vane, Sebastian. I need a compass. I need people who know which way is north, not people who spin whichever way the wind blows." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're fired," Charlotte said. "Your severance package is waiting at HR. It's generous, more than you deserve, but I want you out of this building in 20 minutes. "Charlotte, please, you can't do this." "I can," she said. And I just did. She pressed the intercom. "Maya, please escort Mr. Wright to the elevators." As Sebastian was led away, protesting weakly, Charlotte felt a final weight lift off her shoulders. That was the last of them. The toxicity was purged. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her father. "Silvio, dinner at the club tonight? I believe a celebration is in order. Q3 numbers are in. You beat my record. Charlotte smiled. She typed back, "See you at 7. She grabbed her coat and headed for the elevator. As she walked through the lobby, the security guards nodded respectfully. The receptionists smiled genuinely. She wasn't the invisible wife anymore. She wasn't the victim. She stepped out into the cool New York air. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of golden sunset hitting the skyscrapers. She thought of Paxton for one fleeting second. She wondered if he was cold. She wondered if he finally understood what it meant to work for a living. But then the thought vanished, carried away by the wind. She had a company to run. She had a legacy to build. Charlotte Harrington hailed a cab. She still preferred them to limos, and disappeared into the city she now owned, leaving the ghosts of her past in the dark where they belonged. 5 years is a long time in the business world. Empires can rise, stocks can crash, and names that were once whispered with reverence can be scrubbed from history. For Charlotte Harrington, the last 5 years had been a golden age. Under her leadership, Apex Global hadn't just survived, it had evolved. She had married the ethos of her father's generation with the innovation of her own. She was no longer just Silvio's daughter. She was a titan in her own right, featured on the cover of Time magazine as Person of the Year. She was currently in London for the Global Philanthropy Gala. It was Christmas Eve, and the city was draped in twinkling lights and festive cheer. Snow was falling softly on the cobblestones outside the Savoy Hotel. Inside the ballroom, Charlotte was laughing. She held a glass of sparkling water. She rarely drank champagne anymore. It reminded her too much of that night. Beside her stood Julius Thorne, Archibald Thorne's grandson. Unlike the old guard, Julius was progressive, kind, and brilliantly funny. They had been dating for 2 years. "You look like you're a million miles away," Julius said, squeezing her hand gently. "Just reflecting," Charlotte smiled. 5 years ago tonight, I walked onto a stage and blew my life up. And thank God you did," Julius kissed her cheek. "Otherwise, you'd still be in New York dealing with—" What was his name again? Percival. Paxton, Charlotte corrected, though she had to think about it for a second. His name was Paxton. Right, Paxton, the footnote. "The limousine is waiting," a security guard murmured into Charlotte's ear. "We should head to the airfield if you want to make it to Aspen by morning." "Let's go," Charlotte said. They made their way to the exit. The paparazzi were waiting, a sea of flashes and shouting voices. Charlotte navigated them with practiced ease, smiling, waving, but never stopping. Outside, the air was biting cold. A line of black cars waited. "Wait," Julius said, patting his pockets. "I left my phone at the coat check. Go ahead to the car. I'll run back." "I'll wait here," Charlotte said. She stepped under the heated awning of the hotel entrance to escape the snow. A man was working the valet stand. He was bundled in a heavy, ill-fitting wool coat that had seen better days. He was stamping his feet to keep warm, his breath puffing out in white clouds. He looked older than his years, his face lined with the stress of survival, his hair thinning and grey. He was currently arguing with a guest who was upset about a scratch on their Bentley. "I didn't do it, sir," the valet said, his voice raspy. "It was there when you arrived. I marked it on the ticket." "Don't lie to me," the guest shouted. "You incompetent fool! I want your manager!" "Please, sir," the valet pleaded, a note of desperation in his voice. "I can't lose this shift. It's Christmas Eve. I have rent due." Charlotte froze. She knew that voice. It was a voice that used to demand coffee in bed. A voice that used to brag about stock options. A voice that had once whispered lies into her ear. She turned slowly. The valet looked up, sensing eyes on him. Paxton Sterling locked eyes with Charlotte Harrington. For a moment, the noise of the city faded away. The honking taxis, the paparazzi, the Christmas carols playing from the hotel speakers. It all went silent. Paxton looked at her. He took in the custom Givenchy gown, the diamond earrings, the aura of absolute, untouchable peace that surrounded her. Then he looked down at himself. The cheap uniform, the scuffed shoes, the name tag that simply read, P. Sterling, valet. He had spent 5 years in the wilderness. The warehouse in Leeds had crushed his body, and when he finally crawled back to London, he found that the blacklist Silvio Harrington had implemented was global. No bank would hire him. No firm would consult with him. He had been stripped of his credentials. He was a cautionary tale, a ghost story told in business schools. He had expected to feel anger if he ever saw her again. He expected to scream, to blame her. But now, standing in the snow, all he felt was shame. A hot, burning shame that made him want to dissolve into the pavement. "Charlotte," he whispered. It was barely audible. Charlotte looked at him. She didn't look angry. She didn't look triumphant. There was no smirk of revenge on her lips. There was just pity. The kind of pity you feel for a stray dog shivering in the rain. "Hello, Paxton," she said softly. He stepped forward, his hands trembling. I saw you in the papers. You've done well." "I have," she said. He gestured to his coat. "I'm between opportunities right now, just helping out a friend who owns the valet service. Keeping busy." He was lying. She knew it. He knew she knew it. "It's a cold night for it," she said politely. "Charlotte," Paxton choked out, the desperation breaking through his pride. Is there any chance? I've paid my dues. 5 years, Charlotte. I've lost everything. Your father, he destroyed me. Can't you just make a call? Lift the ban? I just want an office job. Anything. Please." He looked at her with wet, pleading eyes. The arrogance was gone, ground into dust by the hard karma of the real world. Charlotte looked at him. She remembered the nights she had cried herself to sleep while he was with Tiffany. She remembered how he made her feel small so he could feel big. She opened her clutch purse. Paxton's eyes widened. Was she going to give him a card, a contact, a check? She pulled out a £20 note. "Merry Christmas, Paxton," she said, holding it out. Paxton stared at the money. It was the ultimate insult. She wasn't treating him like an ex-husband. She was treating him like the help. "I don't want your money," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Take it," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Buy yourself a hot meal. It's cold out here." She placed the bill in his frozen, gloved hand. At that moment, Julius returned, jogging out of the hotel. "Got it. Sorry about that." He looked at Paxton, then at Charlotte. "Everything okay?" "Do you know this man?" Charlotte looked at Paxton one last time. She looked at the man who had once been her entire world, the man she thought she couldn't live without, and she realized she felt absolutely nothing. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. "No," Charlotte said, turning back to Julius. "I don't know him. Just tipping the valet." She took Julius's arm. "Let's go home," she said. They walked toward the waiting car. The driver opened the door. Charlotte slid into the warm leather interior, Julius following her. Paxton stood on the curb, clutching the £20 note. He watched the car pull away, its tail lights blurring in the falling snow. He watched until it turned the corner and vanished. "Hey, valet!" the angry guest with the Bentley shouted, snapping his fingers. "Are you going to get my car, or are you going to stand there dreaming?" Paxton flinched. He looked down at the money in his hand. He looked at the wet, dirty pavement. "I'm coming, sir," Paxton mumbled. "I'm coming." He turned his collar up against the wind and jogged toward the parking garage, disappearing into the shadows, just another face in the crowd, forgotten by the world he once thought he owned. Karma hadn't just hit back, it had finished the job. And that is the story of Paxton Sterling, a man who had diamonds in his hand but went looking for glitter and ended up with nothing but dust. It's a brutal reminder that how you treat people on your way up is exactly how they will treat you on your way down. Paxton thought Charlotte was weak because she was kind, but he forgot the most important rule of nature. The quietest rivers often hide the deepest currents. What do you think? Did Paxton deserve his fate, or was the punishment too harsh? And what would you have done if you were Charlotte, standing outside that hotel? Would you have helped him, or walked away? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.